Vampire and St. Michael. Once upon a time in a certain village there lived two neighbors. One was rich, very rich, and the other so poor that he had nothing in the world but a little hut, and that was tumbling about his ears. At length things came to such a pass with the poor man that he had nothing to eat and could get work nowhere. Full of grief, he bethought him what he should do. He thought, and at last he said, "Look ye, wife, I'll go to my rich neighbour, perchance he will lend me a silver rouble, that, at any rate, will be enough to buy bread with." So he went. He came to the rich man. "Good health to my lord," cried he. "Good health, I have come on an errand to thee, dear little master." "To what may thine errand be?" inquired the rich man. "Alas, would to God that I had no need to say it. It has come to such a pass with us that there's not a crust of bread nor a farthing of money in the house. So I have come to thee, dear little master. Lend us but a silver rouble, and we will be ever thankful to thee, and I'll work myself whole to pay it back. But who will stand surety for thee?" asked the rich man. "I know not if any man will, I am so poor. Yet, perchance, God and St. Michael will be my sureties." And he pointed at the icon in the corner. Then the icon of St. Michael spoke to the rich man from the niche and said, "Come now, lend it him, and put it down to my account. God will repay thee." "Well," said the rich man, "I'll lend it to thee." So he lent it, and the poor man thanked him and returned to his home full of joy. But the rich man was not content that God should give him back his loan by blessing him in his flocks and herds, and in his children, and in his health, and in the blessed fruits of the earth. He waited and waited for the poor man to come and pay him back his rouble, and at last he went to seek him. "Thou son of a dog," he shouted before the house, "why hast thou not brought me back my money? Thou knowest how to borrow, but thou forgettest to repay." Then the wife of the poor man burst into tears. "He would repay thee indeed if he were in this world," said she, "but lo now, he died but a little while ago." The rich man snarled at her and departed, but when he got home he said to the icon, "A pretty surety thou art." Then he took St. Michael down from the niche, dug out his eyes, and began beating him. He beat St. Michael again, and at last he flung him into a puddle and trampled on him. "I'll give it thee for standing me surety so scurvily," said he. While he was thus abusing St. Michael, a young fellow about 20 years old came along that way, and said to him, "What art thou doing, my father?" "I am beating him because he stood surety and has played me false. He took upon himself the repayment of a silver rouble, which I lent to the son of a pig, who has since gone away and died. That is why I am beating him now. Beat him not." "My father, I'll give thee a silver rouble, but do thou give me this holy image. Take him if thou wilt, but see that thou bring me the silver rouble first." Then the young man ran home and said to his father, "Dad, give me a silver rouble." "But wherefore, my son?" "Thou would buy a holy image," said he. And he told his father how he had seen that heathen beating St. Michael. "Nay, my son, when shall we who are poor find a silver rouble to give to him who is so rich?" "Nay, but give it me, Dad." And he begged and prayed till he got it. Then he ran back as quickly as he could, paid the silver rouble to the rich man, and got the holy image. He washed it clean and placed it in the midst of sweet-smelling flowers, and so they lived on as before. Now this youth had 3 uncles, rich merchants, who sold all manner of merchandise, and went in ships to foreign lands, where they sold their goods and made their gains. One day, when his uncles were again making ready to depart into foreign lands, he said to them, "Take me with you." "Why shouldst thou go?" said they. "We have wares to sell, but what hast thou?" "Yet take me," said he. "But thou hast nothing." "I will make meat laths and boards, and take them with me," said he. His uncles laughed at him for imagining such wares as these, but he begged and prayed them till they were wearied. "Well, come," they said, "though there is naught for thee to do, only take not much of these wares of thine with thee, for our ships are already full." Then he made him laths and boards, put them on board the ship, took St. Michael with him, and they departed. They went on and on. They sailed a short distance, and they sailed a long distance, till at last they came to another tsardom and another empire. And the Tsar of this tsardom had an only daughter, so lovely that the like of her is neither to be imagined nor divined in God's fair world, neither may it be told in tales. Now this Tsarevna one day went down to the river to bathe, and plunged into the water without first crossing herself, whereupon the evil spirit took possession of her. The Tsarevna got out of the water, and straightway fell ill of so terrible a disease that it may not be told of. Do what they would, and the wise men and the wise women did their utmost, it was of no avail. In a few days she grew worse and died. Then the Tsar, her father, made a proclamation that people should come and read the prayers for the dead over her dead body, and so exorcise the evil spirit, and whosoever delivered her was to have half his power and half his tsardom. And the people came in crowds, but none of them could read the prayers for the dead over her. It was impossible. Every evening a man went into the church, and every morning they swept out his bones, for there was not else of him remaining. And the Tsar was very wrath. All my people will be devoured, cried he. And he commanded that all the foreign merchants passing through his realm should be made to read prayers for the dead over his daughter's body. And if they will not read, said he, they shall not depart from my kingdom. So the foreign merchants went one by one. In the evening a merchant was shut up in the church, and in the early morning they came and found and swept away his bones. At last it came to the turn of the young man's uncles to read the prayers for the dead in the church. They wept and lamented and cried, we are lost, heaven help us. Then the eldest uncle said to the lad, listen, good simpleton, it has now come to my turn to read prayers over the Tsarevna. Do thou go in my stead and pass the night in the church, and I'll give thee all my ship. Nay, but, said the simpleton, what if she tear me to pieces too? I won't go. But then St. Michael said to him, go and fear not, stand in the very middle of the church, fence round about with thy laths and boards, and take with thee a basket full of pears. When she rushes at thee, take and scatter the pears, and it will take her till cockcrow to pick them all up. But do thou go on reading thy prayers all the time, and look not up, whatever she may do. When night came, he took up his laths and boards and a basket of pears, and went to the church. He entrenched himself behind his boards, stood there and began to read. At dead of night there was a rustling and a rattling. O Lord, what was that? There was a shaking of the beer bang bang, and the Tsarevna arose from her coffin and came straight toward him. She leaped upon the boards and made a grab at him and fell back. Then she leaped at him again, and again she fell back. Then he took his basket and scattered the pears. All through the church they rolled, she after them, and she tried to pick them up till cockcrow, and at the very first cock-a-doodle-doo she got into her beer again and lay still. When God's bright day dawned, the people came to clean out the church and sweep away his bones, but there he was reading his prayers, and the rumour of it went through the town, and they were all filled with joy. Next night it was the turn of the second uncle, and he began to beg and pray, go thou, simpleton, in my stead. Look now, thou hast already passed a night there, thou mayst very well pass another, and I'll give thee all my ship. But he said, I won't go, I am afraid. But then St. Michael said to him again, fear not, but go, fence thee all about with thy boards, and take with thee a basket of nuts. When she rushes at thee, scatter thy nuts, and the nuts will go rolling all about the church, and it will take her till cockcrow to gather them all up. But do thou go on reading thy prayers, nor look thou up, whatever may happen. And he did so. He took his boards and the basket of nuts, and went to the church at nightfall and read. A little after midnight there was a rustling and an uproar, and the whole church shook. Then came a fumbling round about the coffin, bang, bang. Up she started, and made straight for him. She leaped and plunged, she very nearly got through the boards. She hissed like seething pitch, and her eyes glared at him like coals of fire, but it was of no use. He read on, and didn't once look at her. Besides, he scattered his nuts, and she went after them and tried to pick them all up till cockcrow. And at the first cock-a-doodle-doo, she leaped into her coffin again and pulled down the lid. In the morning the people came to sweep away his bones, and lo, they found him alive. The next night he had to go again in a third uncle's stead. Then he sat down and cried and wailed, "Alas, alas, what shall I do? 'Twere better I had never been born." But St. Michael said to him, "Weep not, 'twill all end happily. Fence thyself about with thy boards, sprinkle thyself all about with holy water, incense thyself with holy incense, and take me with thee. She shall not have thee, and the moment she leaves her coffin, do thou jump quickly into it, and whatever she may say to thee, and however she may implore thee, let her not get into it again until she says to thee, my consort." So he went. There he stood in the middle of the church, fenced himself about with his boards, strewed consecrated poppy seed around him, incensed himself with holy incense, and read. About the middle of the night a tempest arose outside, and there was a rustling and a roaring, a hissing and a wailing. The church shook, the altar candelabra were thrown down, the holy images fell on their faces. "O Lord, how awful!" Then came a bang, bang from the coffin, and again the Tsarevna started up. She left her coffin and fluttered about the church. She rushed at the boards and made a snatch at him, and fell back. She rushed at him again, and again she fell back. She foamed at the mouth, and her fury every instant grew worse and worse. She dashed herself about, and darted madly from one corner of the church to the other, seeking him everywhere. But he skipped into the coffin, with the image of St. Michael by his side. She ran all over the church seeking him. "He was here, and now he is not here," cried she. Then she ran farther on, felt all about her, and cried again, "He was here, and now he's not here." At last she sprang up to the coffin, and there he was. Then she began to beg and pray him, come down, I'll try and catch thee no more, only come down, come down." But he only prayed to God, and answered her never a word. Then the cock crew once, cock-a-doodle-doo, "Alas, come down, my consort," cried she. Then he came down, and they both fell on their knees, and began praying to God, and wept sore, and gave thanks to God because he had had mercy on them both. And at dawn of day crowds of people, with the Tsar at the head of them, came to the church. "Shall we find him reading prayers, or shall we only find his bones?" said they. And lo, there they both were on their knees praying fervently to God. Then the Tsar rejoiced greatly, and embraced both him and her. After that they had a grand service in the church, and sprinkled her with holy water, and baptized her again, and the unclean spirit departed from her. Then the Tsar gave the young man half his power and half his kingdom, but the merchants departed in their ships, with the nephew on board. They lived together, and time went on, and the young man still remained a bachelor, and was so handsome that words cannot describe it. But the Tsar lived alone with his daughter. She, however, grew sadder and sadder, and was no longer like her former self, so sorrowful was she. And the Tsar asked her, saying, "Wherefore art thou so sorrowful?" "I am not sorrowful, father," said she. But the Tsar watched her, and saw that she was sorrowful, and there was no help for it. Then he asked her again, "Art thou Elthenei?" "Dear dad," said she, "I myself know not what is the matter with me." And so it went on, till the Tsar dreamt a dream. And in this dream it was said to him, "Thy daughter grieves because she loves so much the youth who drove the unclean spirit out of her." Then the Tsar asked her, "Dost thou love this youth?" Then she answered, "I do, dear father." "Then why didst thou not tell me before, my daughter?" said he. Then he sent for his heyducks and commanded them, saying, "Go this instant to such and such a kingdom, and there you will find the youth who cured my daughter. Bring him to me." Then they went on and on until they found him, and he took just the same lass and boards that he had had before, and went with them. The Tsar met him, and bought all his boards, and when they split them in pieces, lo, they were full of precious stones. Then the Tsar took him to his own house, and gave him his daughter, and they lived right merrily together. The story of Tremsin, the Bird-jar, and Nastasia, the lovely maid of the sea. There was once upon a time a man and a woman, and they had one little boy. In the summertime they used to go out and mow corn in the fields, and one summer when they had laid their little lad by the side of a sheaf, an eagle swooped down, caught up the child, carried him into a forest, and laid him in its nest. Now in this forest 3 bandits chanced to be wandering at the same time. They heard the child crying in the eagle's nest, "Uwu, uwu, uwu." So they went up to the oak on which was the nest, and said one to another, "Let us hew down the tree and kill the child." "No," replied one of them, "it were better to climb up the tree and bring him down alive." So he climbed up the tree and brought down the lad, and they nurtured him and gave him the name of Tremsin. They brought up Tremsin until he became a youth, and then they gave him a horse, set him upon it, and said to him, "Now go out into the wide world and search for thy father and thy mother." So Tremsin went out into the wide world and pastured his steed on the vast steppes, and his steed spoke to him and said, "When we have gone a little farther, thou wilt see before thee a plume of the bird-jar, pick it not up, or sore trouble will be thine." Then they went on again. They went on and on, through 10 tsardoms they went, till they came to another empire in the land of thrice 10 where lay the feather. And the youth said to himself, "Why should I not pick up the feather when it shines so brightly even from afar?" And he went nearer to the feather, and it shone so that the like of it cannot be expressed or conceived or imagined or even told of in tales. Then Tremsin picked up the feather and went into the town over against him, and in that town there lived a rich nobleman. And Tremsin entered the house of this nobleman and said, "Sir, may I not take service with thee as a labourer?" The nobleman looked at him, and seeing that he was comely and stalwart, "Why not? Of course thou mayst," said he. So he took him into his service. Now this nobleman had many servants, and they curried his horses for him, and made them smart and glossy against the day he should go a-hunting. And Tremsin began to curry his horse likewise, and the servants of the nobleman could not make the horses of their master so shining bright as Tremsin made his own horse. So they looked more closely, and they perceived that when Tremsin cleaned his horse he stroked it with the feather of the bird-jar, and the coat of the good steed straightway shone like burnished silver. Then those servants were filled with envy, and said among themselves, "How can we remove this fellow from the world? We'll saddle him with a task he is unable to do, and then our master will drive him away." So they went to their master and said, "Tremsin has a feather of the bird-jar, and he says that if he likes he can get the bird-jar itself." Then the nobleman sent for Tremsin and said to him, "O Tremsin, my henchmen say that thou canst get the bird-jar if thou dost choose." "Nay, but I cannot," replied Tremsin. "Answer me not," said the nobleman, "for so sure as I've a sword, I'll slice thy head off like a gourd." Then Tremsin fell a-weeping and went away to his horse. "My master," said he, "hath given me a task to do that will clean and do me." "What task is that?" asked the horse. "Why, to fetch him the bird-jar." "Why, that's not a task, but a trifle," replied the horse. "Let us go to the steppes," it continued, "and let me go a-browsing, but do thou strip thyself stark naked and lie down in the grass, and the bird-jar will straightway swoop down to feed, so long as she only claws about thy body, touch her not, but as soon as she begins to claw at thine eyes, seize her by the legs." So when they got to the wild steppes, Tremsin stripped himself naked and flung himself in the grass, and immediately the bird-jar swooped down and began pecking all about him, and at last she pecked at his eyes. Then Tremsin seized her by both legs, and mounted his horse and took the bird-jar to the nobleman. Then his fellow servants were more envious than ever, And they said among themselves, "How shall we devise for him a task to do that cannot be done, and so rid the world of him altogether?" So they bethought them, and then they went to the nobleman and said, "Tremsin says that to get the bird jar was nothing, and that he is also able to get the thrice lovely Anastasia of the sea." Then the nobleman again sent for Tremsin and said to him, "Look now, thou didst get for me the bird jar. See that thou now also gettest for me the thrice lovely Anastasia of the sea." "But I cannot, sir," said Tremsin. "Answer me not, sir," replied the nobleman, "for so sure as I've a sword, I'll slice thy head off like a gourd, and I'll bring her not." Then Tremsin went out to his horse and fell a weeping. "Wherefore dost thou weep?" asked the faithful steed. "Wherefore should I not weep?" he replied. "My master has given me a task that cannot be done." "The what task is that?" "The why, to fetch him the thrice lovely Anastasia of the sea." "Bo-ho," laughed the horse, "that is not a task, but a trifle. Go to thy master and say, cause white tents to be raised by the seashore, and buy wares of sundry kinds, and wine and spirits and bottles and flasks, and the thrice lovely Anastasia will come and purchase thy wares, and then thou mayst take her." And the nobleman did so. He caused white tents to be pitched by the seashore, and bought kerchiefs and scarves, and spread them out gaily, and made great store of wine and brandy in bottles and flasks. Then Tremsin rode toward the tents, and while he was on the way, his horse said to him, "Now when I go to graze, do thou lie down and feign to sleep. Then the thrice lovely Anastasia will appear and say, 'What for thy wares?' But do thou keep silence. But when she begins to taste of the wine and the brandy, then she will go to sleep in the tent, and thou canst catch her easily and hold her fast." Then Tremsin lay down and feigned to sleep, and forth from the sea came the thrice lovely Anastasia, and went up to the tents and asked, "Merchant, merchant, what for thy wares?" But he lay there, and moved never a limb. She asked the same thing over and over again, but getting no answer, went into the tents where stood the flasks and the bottles. She tasted of the wine. How good it was! She tasted of the brandy. That was still better. So from tasting she fell to drinking. First she drank a little, and then she drank a little more, and at last she went asleep in the tent. Then Tremsin seized the thrice lovely Anastasia and put her behind him on horseback, and carried her off to the nobleman. The nobleman praised Tremsin exceedingly, but the thrice lovely Anastasia said, "Look now, since thou hast found the feather of the bird jar, and the bird jar herself, since also thou hast found me, thou must now fetch me also my little coral necklace from the sea." Then Tremsin went out to his faithful steed and wept sorely, and told him all about it. And the horse said to him, "Did I not tell thee that grievous woe would come upon thee if thou didst pick up that feather?" But the horse added, "Come, weep not. After all, 'tis not a task, but a trifle." Then they went along by the sea, and the horse said to him, "Let me out to graze, and then keep watch till thou seest a crab come forth from the sea, and then say to him, I'll catch thee." So Tremsin let his horse out to graze, and he himself stood by the seashore, and watched till he saw a crab come swimming along. Then he said to the crab, "I'll catch thee, thou seize me not," said the crab, "but let me get back into the sea, and I'll be of great service to thee." "Very well," said Tremsin, "but thou must get me from the sea the coral necklace of the thrice lovely Anastasia." And with that he let the crab go back into the sea again. Then the crab called together all her young crabs, and they collected all the coral and brought it ashore, and gave it to Tremsin. Then the faithful steed came running up, and Tremsin mounted it, and took the coral to the thrice lovely Anastasia. "Well," said Anastasia, "thou hast got the feather of the bird jar, thou hast got the bird jar itself, thou hast got me my coral. Get me now from the sea my herd of wild horses." Then Tremsin was sore distressed, and went to his faithful steed and wept bitterly, and told him all about it. "Well," said the horse, "this time 'tis no trifle, but a real hard task. Go now to thy master, and bid him buy 20 hides, and 20 poods. 1 pood equals 40 pounds of pitch, and 20 poods of flax, and 20 poods of hair. So Tremsin went to his master and told him, and his master bought it all. Then Tremsin loaded his horse with all this, and to the sea they went together. And when they came to the sea, the horse said, Now lay upon me the hides, and the tar, and the flax, and lay them in this order: first a hide, and then a pood of tar, and then a pood of flax, and so on, laying them thus till they are all laid. Tremsin did so. And now, said the horse, I shall plunge into the sea, and when thou seest a large red wave driving toward the shore, run away till the red wave has passed, and thou dost see a white wave coming, and then sit down on the shore and keep watch. I shall then come out of the sea, and after me the whole herd. Then thou must strike with the horse, said the horse, which gallops immediately after me, and he will not be too strong for thee. So the faithful sea plunged into the sea, and Tremsin sat down on the shore and watched. The horse swam to a bosque that rose out of the sea, and there the herd of sea horses was grazing. When the strong charger of Nastasia saw him and the hides he carried on his back, it set off after him at full tilt, and the whole herd followed the strong charger of Nastasia. They drove the horse with the hides into the sea and pursued him. Then the strong charger of Nastasia caught up the steed of Tremsin and tore off one of his hides, and began to worry it with his teeth and tear it to fragments as he ran. Then he caught him up a second time, and tore off another hide, and began to worry that in like manner till he had torn it also to shreds. And thus he ran after Tremsin's steed for 70 miles, till he had torn off all the hides, and worried them to bits. But Tremsin sat upon the seashore till he saw the large white billow bounding in, and behind the billow came his own horse, and behind his own horse came the thrice terrible charger of the thrice lovely Nastasia, with the whole herd at his heels. Tremsin struck him full on the forehead with the 20 poods of hair, and immediately he stood stock still. Then Tremsin threw a halter over him mounted, and drove the whole herd to the thrice lovely Nastasia. Nastasia praised Tremsin for his prowess, and said to him, Well, thou hast got the feather of the bird-jar, thou hast got the bird-jar itself, thou hast got me my coral and my herd of horses. Now melt my mare and put the milk into 3 vats, so that there may be milk hot as boiling water in the first vat, lukewarm milk in the second vat, and icy cold milk in the third vat. Then Tremsin went to his faithful steed and wept bitterly, and the horse said to him, Wherefore dost thou weep? Why should I not weep? Cried he, The thrice lovely Nastasia has given me a task to do that cannot be done. I am to fill 3 vats with the milk from her mare, and the milk must be boiling hot in the first vat, and lukewarm in the second, and icy cold in the third vat. Oh ho, cried the horse, that is not a task, but a trifle. I'll caress the mare, and then go on nibbling till thou hast milked all 3 vats full. So Tremsin did so. He milked the 3 vats full, and the milk in the first vat was boiling hot, and in the second vat warm, and in the third vat freezing cold. When all was ready, the thrice lovely Nastasia said to Tremsin, Now, leap first of all into the cold vat, and then into the warm vat, and then into the boiling hot vat. Tremsin leaped into the first vat, and leaped out again an old man. He leaped into the second vat, and leaped out again a youth. He leaped into the third vat, but when he leaped out again, he was so young and handsome that no pen can describe it, and no tale can tell of it. Then the thrice lovely Nastasia herself leaped into the vats. She leaped into the first vat, and came out an old woman. She leaped into the second vat, and came out a young maid. But when she leaped out of the third vat, she was so handsome and goodly that no pen can describe it, and no tale can tell of it. Then the thrice lovely Nastasia made the nobleman leap into the vats. He leaped into the first vat, and became quite old. He leaped into the second vat, and became quite young. He leaped into the third vat, and burst to pieces. Then Tremsin took unto himself the thrice lovely Nastasia to wife, and they lived happily together on the nobleman's estate, and the evil servants they drove right away. The serpent wife There was once a gentleman who had a labourer who never went about in company. His fellow servants did all they could to make him come with them, and now and then enticed him into the tavern, but they could never get him to stay there long, and he always wandered away by himself through the woods. One day he went strolling about in the forest as usual, far from any village and the haunts of men, when he came upon a huge serpent, which wriggled straight up to him and said, "I am going to eat thee on the spot." But the labourer, who was used to the loneliness of the forest, replied, "Very well, eat me if thou hast a mind to." Then the serpent said, "Nay, I will not eat thee, only do what I tell thee." And the serpent began to tell the man what he had to do. "Turn back home," it said, "and thou wilt find thy master angry because thou hast tarried so long." And there was none to work for him, so that his corn has to remain standing in the field. Then he will send thee to bring in his sheaves, and I'll help thee load the wagon well. But don't take quite all the sheaves from the field, leave one little sheaf behind, more than that thou needst not leave, but that thou must leave. Then beg thy master to let thee have this little sheaf by way of wages. Take no money from him, but that one little sheaf only. Then, when thy master has given thee the sheaf, burn it, and a fair lady will leap out of it, take her to wife." The labourer obeyed, and went and worked for his master as the serpent had told him. He went out into the field to bring home his master's corn, and marvellously he managed it. He did all the carrying himself, and loaded the wagon so heavily that it creaked beneath its burden. Then when he had brought home all his master's corn, he begged that he might have the remaining little sheaf for himself. He refused to be rewarded for his smart labour. He would take no money, he wanted nothing for himself, he said, but the little sheaf he had left in the field. So his master let him have the sheaf. Then he went out by himself into the field, burnt the sheaf, just as the serpent had told him, and immediately a lovely lady leapt out of it. The labourer forthwith took and married her, and now he began to look out for a place to build him a hut upon. His master gave him a place where he might build his hut, and his wife helped him so much with the building of it that it seemed to him as if he himself never laid a hand to it. His hut grew up as quick as thought, and it contained everything that they wanted. The man could not understand it, he could only walk about and wonder at it. Wherever he looked there was everything quite spick and span and ready for use. None in the whole village had a better house than he. And so he might have lived in all peace and prosperity to the end of his days had not his desires outstripped his deserts. He had 3 fields of standing corn, and when he came home one day his labourers said to him, "Thy corn is not gathered in yet, though it is standing all ripe on its stalk." Now the season was getting on, and for all the care and labour of his wife, the corn was still standing in the field. "Why, what's the meaning of this?" thought he. Then in his anger he cried, "I see how it is, once a serpent, always a serpent." He was quite beside himself all the way home, and was very wrath with his wife because of the corn. When he got home he went straight to his chamber to lie down on his pillow. There was no sign of his wife, but a huge serpent was just coiling itself round and settling down in the middle of the pillow. Then he called to mind how, once, his wife had said to him, "Beware, for heaven's sake, of ever calling me a serpent. I will not suffer thee to call me by that name, and if thou dost thou shalt lose thy wife." He called this to mind now, but it was already too late. What he had said could not be unsaid. Then he reflected what a good wife he had had, and how she herself had sought him out, and how she had waited upon him continually and done him boundless good, and yet he had not been able to refrain his tongue, so that now, maybe, he would be without a wife for the rest of his days. His heart grew heavy within him as he thought of all this, and he wept bitterly at the harm he had done to himself. Then the serpent said to him, "Weep no more. What is to be, must be. Is it thy standing corn thou art grieved about? Go up to thy barn, and there thou wilt find all thy corn lying, to the very last little grain. Have I not brought it all home and threshed it for thee, and set everything in order? and now I must depart to the place where thou didst first find me." Then she crept off, and the man followed her, weeping and mourning all the time as for one already dead. When they reached the forest, she stopped and coiled herself round and round beneath a hazelnut bush. Then she said to the man, "Now kiss me once, but see to it that I do not bite thee." Then he kissed her once, and she wound herself round a branch of a tree and asked him, "What dost thou feel within thee?" He answered, "At the moment when I kissed thee, it seemed to me as if I knew everything that was going on in the world." Then she said to him again, "Kiss me a second time, then what dost thou feel now?" She asked when he had kissed her again. "Now," said he, "I understand all languages which are spoken among men." Then she said to him, "And now kiss me a third time, but this will be for the last time." Then he kissed the serpent for the last time, and she said to him, "What dost thou feel now?" "Now," said he, "I know all that is going on under the earth." "Go now," said she, "to the Tsar, and he will give thee his daughter for the knowledge thou hast. But pray to God for poor me, for now I must be and remain a serpent forever." And with that the serpent uncoiled herself and disappeared among the bushes, but the man went away and wedded the Tsar's daughter. The story of Unlucky Daniel. There was once upon a time a youth called Unlucky Dan. Wherever he went, and whatever he did, and with whomsoever he served, nothing came of it. All his labor was like spilt water. He got no good from it. One day he took service with a new master. "I'll serve thee a whole year," said he, "for a piece of sown wheat land." His master agreed, and he entered into his service, and at the same time he sowed his piece of wheat land. His wheat shot up rapidly. When his master's wheat was in the stalk, his was already in the ear, and when his master's wheat was in the ear, his own wheat was already ripe. "I'll reap it tomorrow," thought he. The same night a cloud arose, the hail poured down, and destroyed his wheat altogether. Daniel fell a-weeping. "I'll go serve another master," he cried. "Perhaps God will then prosper me." So he went to another master. "I'll serve thee for a whole year," said he, "if thou wilt give me that wild colt." So he stopped and served him, and by the end of the year he trained the wild colt so well that he made a carriage horse out of it. "Oh ho," thought he, "I shall take away something with me this time." The same night the wolves made an inroad upon the stables and tore the horse to pieces. Daniel fell a-weeping. "I'll go to another master," said he, "perhaps I shall be luckier there." So he went to a third master, and on this master's tomb lay a large stone. Whence it came none knew, and it was so heavy that none could move it, though they tried for ages. "I'll serve thee a year," said he, "for that stone." The master agreed, and he entered his service. Then a change came over the stone, and divers flowers began to grow upon it. On one side they were red, on the second side silver, and on the third side golden. "Oh ho," thought Daniel, "that stone, at any rate, will soon be mine. Nobody can move it." But the next morning a thunderbolt descended and struck the stone and shivered it to atoms. Then Daniel fell a-weeping and lamented that God had given him nothing, though he had served for so many years. But the people said to him, "Listen now, thou that art so unlucky, why dost thou not go to the Tsar? He is the father of us all, and will therefore certainly care for thee." So he listened to them and went, and the Tsar gave him a place at his court. One day the Tsar said to him, "I marvel that thou art so unlucky, for do whatsoever thou wilt, thou art none the better for it. I would fain requite thee for all thy labours." Then he took and filled 3 barrels, the first with gold, and the second with coal, and the third with sand, and said to Daniel, "Look now, if thou dost pitch upon that which is filled with gold, thou shalt be a Tsar. If thou dost choose the one that is filled with coal, thou shalt be a blacksmith. But if thou dost pick out the one that is full of sand, why then thou art indeed hopelessly unlucky, and out of my tsardom thou must go straightway. Yet I will give thee a horse and armor to take along with thee." So Daniel was brought to the place where were the 3 barrels, and went about them, and felt them one after the other. "This one is full of gold," said he. They broke it open, and it was full of sand. "Well," said the Tsar, "I see that thou art hopelessly unlucky. Depart from my tsardom, for I have no need at all of such as thou." Then he gave him a charger and armor, and the full equipment of a Cossack, and sent him away. He went on and on for a whole day. He went on and on for a second day, and there was nothing to eat, either for his horse or himself. He went for a 3rd day, and in the distance he saw a haycock. "That will do for my horse, at any rate," thought he, "even if it is of no good to me." So he went up to it, and immediately it burst into flames. Daniel began to weep, when he heard a voice crying piteously, save me, I am burning, but how can I save thee?" he cried, "when I myself cannot draw near." "Oh, give me thy weapon," cried the voice, "and I'll seize hold of it, and then thou canst pull me out." So he stretched forth his weapon, and drew forth a goodly serpent, such as is only known of in old folk songs. And she said to him, "Since thou hast drawn me out, thou must also take me home. But how shall I carry thee?" asked he. "Carry me on thy horse, and in whatsoever direction I turn my head and his, thither go." So he took her upon his horse, and they went on and on till they came to a court so splendid that it was a delight to look at it. Then she glided down from his charger and said, "Wait here, and I'll soon be with thee again." And with that she wriggled under the gate. He stood there and waited till he wept from sheer weariness, but at last she came out again in the shape of a lovely damsel in gorgeous raiment, and opened the gate for him. "Lead in thy horse," said she, "and eat and rest a while." So they went into the courtyard, and in the midst of it stood 2 springs. The lady drew out of one of these springs a little glass of water, and strewing a handful of oats beside it, said, "Fasten up thy horse here." "But what," thought he, "for these 3 days we have had naught to eat or drink, and now she mocks us with a handful of oats." Then they went together to the guest chamber, and she gave him there a little glass of water and a small piece of wheaten bread. "Why, what is this for a hungry man like me?" thought he. But when he chanced to glance through the window, he saw that the whole courtyard was full of oats and water, and that his horse had already eaten its fill. Then he nibbled his little piece of wheaten bread and sipped his water, and his hunger was immediately satisfied. "Well," said the lady, "hast thou eaten thy fill?" "For that I have," he replied. "Then lie down and rest a while," said she. And the next morning, when he rose up, she said to him, "Give me thy horse, thy armor, and thy raiment, and I'll give thee mine in exchange." Then she gave him her shift and her weapon, and said, "This sword is of such a sort that, if thou do but wave it, all men will fall down before thee, and as for this shift, when once thou hast it on, none will be able to seize thee. And now go on thy way till thou come to an inn, and there they will tell thee that the Tsar of that land is seeking warriors. Go and offer thyself to him, and thou shalt marry his daughter, but tell her not the truth for 7 years." Then they took leave of each other, and he departed. He came to the inn, and there they asked him whence he came. And when they knew that he came from a strange land, they said to him, "A strange people has attacked our Tsar, and he cannot defend himself, for a mighty warrior has conquered his tsardom and carried off his daughter, and worries him to death. Show me the way to your Tsar," said Daniel. Then they showed him, and he went. When he came to the Tsar, he said to him, "I will subdue this strange land for thee. All the army I want is a couple of Cossacks, but they must be picked men." Then the heralds went through the tsardom till they had found these 2 Cossacks, and Daniel went forth with them into the endless steppes, and there he bade them lie down and sleep while he kept watch. And while they slept, the army of the strange country came upon them, and cried to Daniel to turn back if he would escape destruction. And then they began to fire with their guns and cannons, and they fired so many balls that the bodies of the 2 Cossacks were quite covered by them. Then Dana waved his sword and smote, and only those whom his blows did not reach escaped alive. So he vanquished them all, and conquered that strange land, and came back and married the Tsar's daughter, and they lived happily together. But counselors from the strange land whispered dark sayings in the ears of the Tsarevna. What is this fellow that thou hast taken to thyself? Who is he, and whence? Find out for us wherein lies his strength, that we may destroy him and take thee away. Then she began asking him, and he said to her, Look now, all my strength is in these gloves. Then she waited till he was asleep, and drew them off him, and gave them to the people from the strange land. And the next day he went hunting, and the evil counselors surrounded and shot at him with their darts, and beat him with the gloves, but it was all in vain. Then he waved his sword, and whomsoever he struck fell to the ground, and he clapped them all in prison. But his wife caressed and wheedled him again, and said, Nay, but tell me, wherein doth thy strength lie? My strength, darling, said he, lies in my boots. Then she drew off his boots while he slept, and gave them to his enemies. And they fell upon him again as he went out, but again he waved his sword, and as many as he struck fell to the ground, and he put them all in prison. Then his wife wheedled and caressed him the third time. Nay, but tell me, darling, quoth she, wherein doth thy strength fly? Then he was wearied with her beseeching, and said to her, My strength lies in this sword of mine, and in my shirt, and so long as I have the shirt on, nobody can touch me. Then she caressed and fondled him, and said, Thou shouldst take a bath, my darling, and well wash thyself. My father always did so. So he let himself be persuaded, and no sooner had he undressed than she changed all his clothes for others, and gave his sword and his shirt to his enemies. Then he came out of his bath, and immediately they fell upon him, cut him to pieces, put him in a sack, placed him on his horse, and let the horse go where it would. So the horse went on, and wandered farther and farther, till it came to the old place where he had stayed with the serpent lady. And when his benefactress saw him, she said, Why, if poor unlucky Dino hasn't fallen into a scrape again. And immediately she took him out of the sack, and fitted his pieces together, and washed them clean, and took healing water from one of the springs, and living water from the other, and sprinkled him all over, and he stood there sound and strong again. Now, did I not bid thee tell not thy wife the truth for 7 years, said she, and thou wouldst not take heed? And he stood there, and spoke never a word. Well, now rest a while, she continued, for thou dost need it, and then I'll give thee something else. So the next day she gave him a chain, and said to him, Listen, go to that inn where thou didst go before, and early next morning, whilst thou art bathing, bid the innkeeper beat thee with all his might on the back with this chain, and so thou wilt get back to thy wife, but tell her not a word of what has happened. So he went to the same inn and passed the night there, and on the morrow he called the innkeeper, and said to him, Look now, the first time I dip my head in the water, beat me about the back with this chain as hard as thou canst. So the innkeeper waited till he had ducked his head under the water, and then he thrashed him with the chain, whereupon he turned into a horse so beautiful that it was a delight to look upon it. The innkeeper was so glad, so glad. So I've got rid of one guest only to get another one, thought he. He lost no time in taking the horse to the fair, and offered it for sale, and among those who saw it was the Tsar himself. What dost thou ask for it? Said the Tsar. I ask 5,000 rubles. Then the Tsar counted down the money and took the horse away. When he got to his court, he made a great to-do about his beautiful horse, and cried to his daughter, Come and see, dear little heart, what a fine horse I have bought. Then she came forth to look at it, but the moment she saw it, she cried, That horse will be my ruin. Thou must kill it on the spot. Nay, dear little heart, how can I do such a thing? Said the Tsar. Slay it thou must, and slay it thou shalt, cried the Tsarevna. So they sent for a knife, and began sharpening it, when one of the maidens of the court took pity on the horse and cried, "Oh, my good, my darling horse, so lovely as thou art, and yet to kill thee." But the horse neighed and went to her and said, "Look now, take the first drop of blood which flows from me, and bury it in the garden." Then they slew the horse, but the maiden did as she was told, and took the drop of blood and buried it in the garden. And from this drop of blood there sprang up a cherry tree, and its first leaf was golden, and its second leaf was of richer colour still, and its third leaf was yet another colour, and every leaf upon it was different to the others. One day the Tsar went out walking in his garden, and when he saw this cherry tree he fell in love with it, and praised it to his daughter. "Look," said he, "what a beauteous cherry tree we have in our garden, who can tell whence it sprung?" But the moment the Tsarevna saw it, she cried, "That tree will be my ruin, thou must cut it down." "Nay," said he, "how can I cut down the fairest ornament of my garden? Down it must come, and down it shall come," replied the Tsarevna. Then they sent for an axe and made ready to cut it down, but the damsel came running up and said, "Oh, darling little cherry tree, darling little cherry tree, so fair thou art, from a horse hast thou sprung, and now they will fell thee before thou hast lived a day." "Never mind," said the cherry tree, "take the first chip that falls from me, and throw it into the water." Then they cut down the cherry tree, but the girl did as she was bidden, and threw the first chip from the cherry tree into the water, and out of it swam a drake so beautiful that it was a delight to look upon it. Then the Tsar went hunting, and saw it swimming in the water, and it was so close that he could touch it with his hand. The Tsar took off his clothes and plunged into the water after it, and it enticed him farther and farther away from the shore. Then the drake swam toward the spot where the Tsar had left his clothes, and when it came up to them it changed into a man and put them on, and behold, the man was Daniel. Then he called to the Tsar, "Swim hither, swim hither." The Tsar swam up, but when he swam ashore Daniel met and killed him, and after that he went back to court in the Tsar's clothes. Then all the courtiers hailed him as the Tsar, but he said, "Where is that damsel who was here just now?" They brought her instantly before him. "Well," said he to her, "thou hast been a second mother to me, and now thou shalt be my second wife." So he lived with her and was happy, but he caused his first wife to be tied to the tails of wild horses and torn to pieces in the endless steppes.